Welcome back, you filthy exiles. I obviously put up a build curation video last night, and pretty much the builds I put in that, I'm pretty happy with them at this stage. Definitely going to be playing Bleed Bow. Now, we got the patch notes today. Yep, a lot of nerfs. They pretty much nerfed everything, but they didn't really touch skills like Blade Vortex and, of the likes. And there are a few things that I've actually picked up on that they did either not touch or buff slightly that make certain builds a little more fun than what they used to be, and may switch the off meta to more of a meta. Anyway, I have actually found a couple of Necromancer builds that are going to be very playable in this league, with no impact on them whatsoever in the patch notes, and a few other builds that I looked at in the comments that people asked for as well. So I thought I'd locate some good stuff on those and find some good trees and some good source material to give you some more ideas. For everyone who slung a bit of shit at the last video, don't really care. I just enjoy uploading these videos and helping people figure out how they want to play or what they want to play. So I'm going to keep doing it. And anyway, that's segueing into another 5 builds for the 3.13 Ritual League. Alright, so the first build that we've got is Magefist Flicker Strike Inquisitor. Now, 2 pieces to why I picked this one. Number 1, I kept getting requests for Flicker Strike builds. And number 2, Inquisitor's going to be dope this league. So, what's going on here? Essentially, this build is using some dirt cheap items, including a Terminus S that's using a Stark Onges, a Wall of fucking Brambles, and a Hrimberm Goat's Hide set of gloves, a Belt of the Deceiver. There's no expensive gear on this build. It's pretty inexpensive to get started. That's why he's got a class as a league starter. Also, this guy plays non-stop fucking Flicker Strike builds, which is just completely bizarre. But anyway, he gets to about 1.2 million DPS with complete trash bag gear. His explanations are pretty good. He's got a lot of videos. You could go through his channel and have a look at his guides. But basically, Flicker Strike, you just generate Frenzy charges, and then you go bam, 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 everything dies. Now, where this gets good is, obviously, with the new Ascendancies, you're now going to be able to generate Fanaticism charges on the Inquisitor, which is going to increase your cast speed, your damage, everything else. And then also, Consecrated Ground is going to be a little more powerful this league as well. Essentially, across the board, the Inquisitor nodes are going to be pretty damn OP, or, within reason. So anyway, I thought this would be a nice build to throw in there and get everyone started. And this is very much a starter build. The gearing's dirt cheap. You get a good DPS. And if you really want to play Flicker Strike, I know it's not the best build in the world. It's not going to shift mountains, but it's going to be hella fun for a starter build. And this one will get you there pretty damn quickly and on the cheap. Okay, so the next build we're going to look at is actually Esoro's Facebreaker Cyclone Max Block Gladiator. Now, why this build? You know what? I played it a few leagues ago, as in not this one, but I put my own one together, and I focused on Reckoning, and it's an incredibly good build. Obviously, there's only 2 items you realistically need to get this one cranking, and that's the Abyssus and the Facebreakers. And even with the Abyssus doing, so basically how this works is you don't use a main hand weapon, you simply use a shield, Facebreakers, and the Abyssus and the Ridgewald's Curse, all relatively cheap items to get within the first week of League, and Cyclone with Facebreaker and Abyssus scales quite well. Now, the advantage of being a Gladiator playing max block with a shield is that 75% chance to block hits is going to negate the impact of wearing the Abyssus. And obviously the Abyssus is an additional 40% around about physical damage taken to your character. But if you're not getting hit, you're not going to take that damage, and that's the logic of this build. But anyway, Esoro guides, as always, are amazing. This one's actually got close to 500,000 views on it. It's incredibly tanky, it's high DPS, the tree's capping at 7.2, but that's obviously with better gear. But realistically, there's not a lot of gearing that you need to do in this that's crazy. The things that you'll rip out is you're not going to go with a Lethal Pride straight away, you're not going to go with a Watcher's Eye straight away, obviously. Rustlythans will take a little bit, but everything else, and maybe the Abyssus and everything else can be achieved pretty easily, and you don't even need to run the Abyssus because you could go alternatively into Harvest Crafting and craft a ridiculously awesome shield that way. So as an overall, exceptional build, pretty cheap. Used to be the meta in was it 13.11? Sorry, 3.11. But then dropped off in 3.12 and wasn't so much the meta. But I would say this is definitely a solid build to play as a league starter. It's going to scale well. It's tanky. It's just overall good, and it's relatively cheap to gear up as well. Okay, so the next one is actually a Glacial Hammer Inquisitor by Nicro. Now, why did I pick this? Well, they actually released a bit of a change to Chimeria's Avarice, which are the hammers that everyone gets, drop constantly, and nobody uses. But basically, now they trigger the an Icicle Burst skill on hit rather than on kill, which means every time you hit with Glacial Hammer, you're going to throw out an Icicle Burst skill, which is what you can see those little ice spears running around. And that's going to be every time you hit. Now, if you're running 2 of these, you can do amazing amounts of damage in AoE, which actually makes it more viable. And then in this build, it doesn't include an Explodey chest or anything like that. But, you know, later down the track, you can switch out, put an Explodey chest on this build, and you can actually do quite a bit of damage with a lot of tankability. And obviously, with the new nodes that are available on the Ascendancy tree for the Inquisitor, it's actually going to be quite powerful. Even the POB as it stands is at up to 1.8 million DPS. And that is Shape or Cyrus DPS, which is essentially Shaper DPS with a little bit of an adjustment there. But yeah, essentially, I looked at this build and I went, this is incredibly interesting. And his build guide's quite well fleshed out. It's definitely an entry-level build, and no one really plays Glacial Hammer, which is even better because it's something that you can actually play that's achievable. As you can see on the screen, he's just trolling you. You're running two Avarices, like nobody does that. And it also uses 2 gifts from above, so it has a high level of rarity find as well, which potentially could be good if you can get quad on your build. But if you wanted to play something different, if you wanted to finally use those Winter Burial jewels that drop all the time, then this might actually be the build for you. It's not a god level build. It's not going to be like one-shotting Cyrus or anything like that. You never know, you might be able to get it there with the new Ascendancies, but it's definitely something interesting and different to look at, and you can definitely play it as a very solid league starter and play all content with it from what I can see here and what I can see in the POB. Okay, so the next one is actually a tried and true build, which is from Path of Exile builds. And he does amazing builds, or that team does amazing builds. This is definitely a league starter build. You know, obviously the tree that they'll provide is essentially endgame, but from what you can see, it's pretty crazy. Now, obviously, carrying golems have been nerfed, stone golems have been nerfed, specters have been nerfed. Pretty much any necromancer skill that was the meta has been nerfed. So now we have to look at things that aren't so meta. What has actually been increased by 50% damage is the Dead Reckoning jewel. So potentially you could actually retool this build to run skeletal mages, and that would do you know, 50% more damage with skeleton mages going forwards. But as you can see, you know, basically the skeletons completely swamp enemies and they destroy them. I myself did a build similar to this in the previous league, and I was doing A8 Cyrus with no issues, and in fact I was just doing it deathless. It's just an incredibly easy build to play. It scales well, skeletons are just powerful, and I think out of all the minions going forwards, they're one of the most powerful, second only to the next one that I'm about to mention. Okay, so the next build is actually Navandis' Phantasm Necromancer, and this is his go-to build for any events, anything. Basically how this works, and his build guide, I might add, is incredibly detailed. His POB has a cluster variant and a non-cluster variant with exceptionally good damage, either one you take. And on top of that, he has notes written into his guide, basically everything that you need to know, as with the one that I mentioned in the video I put up last night, he's thought of it. Now, why is this build special? Well, Phantasms for a very long time have been looked at as not a skill that is overly pliable and really isn't the most played Necromancer skill in the game. But let's give it a little bit of respect here. Without any cluster jewels, and if you've spec'd your build correctly, you get 21 active minions when you run the Soul Rest Ezomite staff, which allows you to summon Phantasms. Now, the benefit of having 21 minions is that when each one does 400,000 DPS aroundabouts times 21, that's quite a lot of damage. And what you can see on screen is, in fact, it does an incredible amount of damage. Now, also on top of that, the Soul Rest allows you to, when you consume a corpse recently, you and your nearby allies regenerate 5% life per second. So thinking on that for just a couple of moments, that is a huge amount of life regeneration. Just the amount of applications that you can run with this in substitution running specters is quite amazing. Now, on top of that, Leash of Ablation has been buffed in this last patch. So now Leash of Ablation, which is a Necromancer specific belt, no longer grants 25% reduced effect of offerings and affects all versions of this item. So basically you can have, what I interpret that as, is you can have all offerings. Now I'm not 100% on that, I need to test that. But potentially that also means that, you know, you can have multiple offerings with you know, no downside to having those offerings up. I think it's just a reduced amount of time is what the base item permits. So essentially you can basically, because how this works is you'll run Cyclone, you'll run Cast While Channeling, and then you'll run Desecrate on Cast While Channeling, and while you Desecrate you'll have your other 3 sockets with each 3 of the auras to buff up your minions and yourself, depending on the nodes that you take. Now, you know, either or. Now, what this basically means is that, yeah, that's going to be quite powerful. There's no real downside. So you can have max leveled offerings, and you can basically offering buff your minions and yourself if you choose the right nodes in the tree. Again, making this an incredibly tanky and incredibly efficient build. Now, from a League starter perspective, this is a relatively easy build to get going. Now, you will need a Soul Rest. That's the only caveat with this build, but they're pretty achievable within League relatively easily. And even in the level up process, you'll probably do something like skeletons or zombies until you get to a comfortable position where you can afford, you know, the few C that you might need for a Soul Rest. And then you can go from there and get this build cranking. But it's not a very hard build to get going. It's quite fun. It's completely different and bizarre compared to every other build I've seen for Necromancers for some time. I was hearing people talk about this in the Discord a little while ago as well, but I didn't really think anything of it. But I'd actually say that this is going to be an incredibly good and potentially new meta Necromancer build for this league, considering everything else for Necromancers has been nerfed. So yeah, this would be my pick for number 5, and I actually want to play this build myself as potentially my second build because it just looks like a lot of fun. Alright, so yeah, that's another 5 builds to sink your teeth into. A few that are a little different, a few that are a lot of fun, and a few that may substitute out some of the builds that are simply just not necessarily going to be near as powerful, such as Necromancers in this current league, at least the Necromancer variants that were played in the past leagues. Anyway, if this video helped you get some more ideas on what to play, guided you to some decent build guides, or gave you anything else, then like and sub. If you didn't like this video, that's fine. You're more than welcome to not like the videos that I post up, but yeah, let's keep the comments constructive and productive, and you know, all learn together as a community. Anyway, until next time, see you later and bye.